million for 5 hours. Victoria, all I ask is that you look at me like you don't hate me." His words, as cold and sharp as the diamond bracelet clasping her wrist, were the final instructions before the show began. Outside the gilded cage of the Rolls-Royce, the Starlight Charity Gala was pulsing with predatory energy. Its red carpet, a river of light flowing toward a sea of flashing cameras. He was Caleb Sutton, the most powerful and broken CEO in the city. And she was Victoria Vance, the beautiful and devastating lie he was about to tell the world. But neither of them could have imagined that the moment she stepped out of the car. That lie would become a stunningly beautiful truth. Just smile, nod. Let me answer the questions. Remember, Victoria, this is a performance. Everything we do tonight, from now until we leave, is a performance. Caleb Sutton's voice was cold and precise, like a scalpel, cutting through the cramped and luxurious space of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Outside, excited screams and flashbulbs like a silent thunderstorm signaled their arrival. The night was the Starlight Charity Gala, New York's pinnacle social event, the jewel in the crown of the Sutton Luxury Group. Victoria Vance said nothing. She just stared out the window, where hundreds of reporters, journalists, and photographers crowded behind the red velvet fence like a pack of hungry beasts waiting for prey. Her heart pounded in her chest, a rapid, panicked drumbeat. The show, that was all he cared about. A deal, a role. In exchange for saving her ancestral home, she would play the happy woman next to her widowed brother-in-law, a man she had loved and hated for nearly a decade. Caleb sighed, a dry sound filled with impatience. "Victoria, are you listening?" She turned, her blue eyes, the only thing about her that seemed familiar at the moment, meeting his cold gray ones. "I hear you, Caleb. Smile, nod, and keep quiet. I understand my role." He seemed about to say something more, perhaps give further instructions, but the car came to a complete stop. A doorman in immaculate uniform bowed and reached for the door handle. The moment had come. "Ready?" Caleb asked, but it wasn't really a question. It was an order. Victoria didn't answer. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them again, a magical transformation had taken place. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a calm, almost regal air. She was no longer Victoria Vance, the reclusive art historian. She was whoever Caleb needed her to be. The doorman opened the car door. There was silence for a moment. A pair of emerald satin Christian Louboutin stilettos, the soles as red as blood on the red carpet, gently landed. Then a long, slender leg appeared. The crowd held its breath. And then Victoria Vance stepped out of the darkness of the car into the glare of hundreds of flashbulbs, and the world stopped spinning. This was not the bookish Victoria Caleb knew, the one who wore baggy sweaters and old jeans, her hair always pulled back in a hasty bun. This was not the quiet shadow of her famous sister, Eleanor. The woman on the red carpet was a masterpiece. The emerald Zac Posen gown hugged her hourglass figure perfectly, the daring open back revealing flawless pale skin. Her ash blonde hair was no longer hidden. It was styled in soft Hollywood waves, cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight. The expert makeup, done by a top artist, worked its magic. It didn't hide her. It enhanced her. It highlighted her high cheekbone structure that no one had ever noticed. Her full lips were painted a subtle nude, and most importantly, it made her blue eyes look deep and mysterious. She did not smile immediately. She stood there for a second, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd, fearless and confident. She was no longer Eleanor Sutton's sister. She was a powerful person in her own right. The stunned silence of the crowd of reporters lasted exactly a second and a half, before it was broken into a storm of frantic sound. Flashes flashed incessantly, turning the night into day. The screams of photographers rang out. "Over here! Miss, look this way! God, who is she? Mr. Sutton, who is this?" The questions were shouted, one on top of the other, but they were not the questions Caleb and his PR team had prepared for. No one asked about the company's stock. No one asked about the merger rumors. Every camera, every microphone, every eye was focused on the breathtakingly beautiful, mysterious woman standing next to the Rolls-Royce. Caleb, who had intended to step out after her to take control, froze inside the car. He looked out the window. And for the first time in nearly a decade of knowing each other, he actually saw Victoria Vance. He didn't see a clumsy sister-in-law or a painful reminder of his dead wife. He saw a complete stranger, a woman so bright it blinded him. His throat was suddenly dry. His plans, his scripts, were all thrown out the window. On the far side of the red carpet, near the hotel entrance, Julian Croft stood with a mocking smile on his face, whispering something in the ear of a prominent tabloid journalist. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see Caleb Sutton appear alone, cementing the image of the tragic, lonely billionaire he had spent weeks building in the newspapers. But then he saw Victoria. He saw the crowd's reaction. He saw the media storm brewing, not about Caleb's downfall, but about the mysterious and alluring presence of the woman beside him. Julian's smile froze. His eyes narrowed, a new anger and calculation in them. His plan had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. On the red carpet, Victoria finally smiled, a soft, reserved, powerful smile. Then she turned, extending her hand toward Caleb, who was still stunned in the car. It was an unscripted gesture, a powerful one. She wasn't waiting for him to lead. She was inviting him to join her performance. Caleb blinked, snapping out of his daze. He took her hand, feeling her soft, warm skin. As he stepped out of the car, the screaming grew louder. He straightened up beside her, trying to regain his usual composure. But when he looked into Victoria's eyes, he saw a sparkle, a mischievousness he had never seen before. In that moment, Caleb Sutton, the powerful CEO of Sutton Luxury Group, realized an alarming truth: he had completely lost control. 3 weeks ago, widow billionaire can't move on. Sutton's instability does personal pain threaten the future of an empire. Insider concerns CEO Caleb Sutton is becoming more isolated and distant. Isabel, the Sutton Group's loyal and talented PR director, slid a stack of gossip magazines and online articles across Caleb's polished mahogany desk. Her voice was razor sharp. Julian Croft isn't just attacking the company, Caleb, he's attacking you personally. He's painting a narrative of an emotionally unstable leader, paralyzed by the past. He wants to scare the shareholders. He wants them to think you're no longer competent to steer this ship. The board vote on opposing his hostile takeover is less than a month away. We need to change that narrative. Immediately. Caleb stared at the vicious headlines. They were like vultures pecking at his wounds, turning his most private pain into a weapon to use against himself. 2 years since his beloved wife Eleanor died after a long battle with illness, he had buried himself in work. The Sutton Group was the legacy he wanted to build for her, a fortress to protect her memory. But now that fortress was under attack from within, by an enemy with no sense of morality. So what do you propose? Isabel. An interview with Oprah to cry about my feelings? He growled, the exhaustion and anger evident in his voice. No, Isabel said firmly. I'm suggesting actions, not words. You need a date for the Starlight Gala, and not some hourly model or some actress looking for fame. That would only make things worse. You need someone who shows stability, respect for the past, but also a sign that you're looking forward to the future. A fresh start. That would change the story completely. Caleb laughed, a bitter laugh. A new start. I don't even know where to begin. I don't date. Isabel, you know that. I know, she said more softly. That's why it has to be someone special. Someone you can trust. Someone who won't sell the story to the press. And most importantly, someone with a connection to Eleanor who can speak of her with respect and love if asked. Caleb was silent. He ran through his small list of acquaintances. There were no names. Everyone in his circle had a price. Then, like a bolt from the blue, a name popped into his head. A name he had tried not to think about for the past 2 years. Victoria, Eleanor's sister, the one who stood silently at the funeral, her eyes swollen but not shedding a tear, the one who refused any financial help from him afterward, the one who lived a semi-reclusive life at Vance Manor, their family's old suburban estate, surrounded by books and ghosts of the past. She was the only one who fit that description, and the thought made him feel strangely uncomfortable. The next day, he drove to Vance Manor. The once magnificent estate now looked tired. The white paint was peeling, and the once manicured grounds were overgrown with weeds. He found Victoria in the library, a large room with walls covered from floor to ceiling with books. She was sitting on an old wooden ladder, glasses on, reading a thick book, a lock of ash blonde hair escaping from her messy bun. She wasn't surprised to see him. She just marked the page and climbed down, her face expressionless. "Caleb," she said, her voice flat. "What brings the King of New York to visit this remote part of the country?" Caleb, not used to beating around the bush, got straight to the point. He explained about Julian Croft, about the media attack, about the gala, and then he made his offer, a cold, pragmatic, transactional offer. "I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend at the gala," he concluded, "just for one night. In return, I will pay off the $2 million debt that is threatening this house." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a laugh that was devoid of any mirth. "Wonderful. That's very Caleb Sutton." She grabbed a stack of letters from the desk and threw them at him. Overdue bank notices clattered to the ancient floor. "Eleanor always said everything to you was a transaction, a calculation of costs and benefits. She said their marriage, in its later years, was like a business merger. Now you're putting a price on her legacy and her memory, aren't you?" Her accusation hit him like a punch. "That's not true," he countered, his voice a little defensive. "Isn't it?" Victoria stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Where were you those last months? Caleb, you were busy with meetings in Tokyo, deals in London. You built an empire, but you abandoned the woman you claimed to be building it for. Do you know how lonely she was? She called me, crying for hours. She said she felt like she was just a pretty decoration in your perfect life." Her words were like shards of glass, cutting into Caleb's conscience. Because deep down, he knew there was some truth to them. Backed into a corner, for the first time in 2 years, the icy wall around him began to crack. I didn't know what to do," he confessed, his voice breaking unexpectedly. "I saw her getting weaker, and I felt helpless, completely helpless. So I did the only thing I knew I worked. I threw myself into building something solid, something that would last forever, as a way to counteract the fact that I was losing her. I was wrong. I know that. But I did it all for her." The confession was so raw and painful that Victoria was stunned. She had always seen Caleb cold and distant. She had never seen a man so broken, so haunted by his own helplessness. Her anger faded, replaced by a sudden empathy. She saw his pain mirror her own. After a moment of silence, she took a deep breath. "Okay, Caleb," she said, her voice softer. "I will do it. But not for your money. I will not let you pay for this house. I will do it to protect Eleanor's memory. And maybe to protect the man she loved." The next few weeks were a strange journey into the past and present. They had to construct a believable story, which meant they had to talk. Really talk. For the first time. They sat in the Vance Manor library, leafing through old photo albums. Victoria told him stories of her and Eleanor's childhood. Secrets only the two of them knew. Caleb, in turn, shared memories of his and Eleanor's early love before work and illness intervened. With each story, a layer of ice melted between them. Then came the transformation. Caleb called in his best team a celebrity stylist, a makeup artist, and a hairdresser. At first, Victoria felt like a puppet being put together. But then, when she saw her reflection in the mirror, she was shocked. "I don't recognize myself anymore." she whispered as she emerged from the fitting room in an emerald dress. Caleb, who was sitting in an armchair, looked at her, speechless. He had become so used to the image of the girl that she was almost invisible. The woman standing before him now was gorgeous and confident. I never really looked at you," he confessed, his voice awkward but sincere. "You were always there, but in my mind, you were always Eleanor's shadow. I was wrong." Those words, more than the expensive dress, reached Victoria. For the first time, she felt like he wasn't just looking at the past when he was with her. He was starting to see her. The night before the gala, they had a rehearsal at a Michelin-starred restaurant that Caleb had booked especially for them. No cameras, no prying eyes, just the two of them. That night, Victoria didn't talk about Eleanor. She talked about herself. She told him about her passion for Renaissance art, about the doctoral thesis she was writing. Caleb listened, completely enthralled. He realized that the woman sitting across from him was more than just Eleanor's sister. She was smart, witty, and had a rich inner world that he had never known. "So," he said, a rare small smile appearing on his lips, "you weren't just hiding in the library, you were building your own empire, were you?" Victoria smiled back. An empire made of stories, not steel and glass. As they left the restaurant, a light rain began to fall. Caleb took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, a surprisingly casual gesture. Their hands brushed. A faint electric current passed between them. They stared at each other for a long moment under the New York streetlights, and the line between a business deal and something else began to undeniably melt. And now, they are in the midst of their own storm. Inside the magnificent ballroom of the Astoria Hotel, Victoria Vance was a phenomenon. The light from the giant crystal chandeliers seemed to shine on her alone. She moved through the crowd of New York's elite with an innate grace and confidence, as if she were born to do this. Caleb walked beside her, but their roles had subtly reversed. He was no longer the guide, the protector. He had become the supporter, the proud attendant. He introduced her to major shareholders, business associates, and he watched in amazement as she charmed them all. She didn't just talk about the weather or trivial gossip. She chatted with an elderly art collector about the differences in technique between Titian and Tintoretto. She argued intelligently with a banking magnate about the economic impact of art on cities. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant. And Caleb, for the first time in a long time, felt pure pride. Not pride in a business accomplishment, but pride in the woman standing beside him. He looked at the way she smiled, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her passion, and a warm, dangerous feeling spread in his chest. It was admiration, and perhaps something deeper, but such a perfect night could not last. Julian Croft, with a venomous grin, decided it was time to spit. He walked up to their table, where they were sitting with a few important investors. Following him, like a bloodhound, was a tabloid journalist known for his ruthless questioning. "Caleb," old friend Julian said, his voice dripping with pretense, loud enough for everyone around him to hear. "I must say, I'm impressed. You've gotten over your grief so quickly." He glanced at Victoria from head to toe with an insulted appraisal. "It's admirable to find such a beautiful replacement. I just wonder if this charm comes with a clause in the contract." The atmosphere around the banquet table suddenly turned cold. The investors looked at each other in confusion. This was the moment Julian had been waiting for. He wanted to provoke Caleb, to make him angry, to scream, to act like a lunatic, to prove to everyone that he was really unstable. Caleb clenched his fists under the table. His jaw clenched. He felt a hot rage rising. He had dared insult both Victoria and Eleanor's memory in the same sentence. He prepared to stand up and do exactly what Julian wanted. But before he could act, he felt a gentle hand on his... It was Victoria's. She squeezed. A silent message. "Let me." She turned to Julian, and a smile appeared on her lips. but it wasn't the warm smile she had been giving everyone all evening. This smile was cold as ice. "Thank you for your compliment, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice sweet as honey but sharp as broken glass. "You are right. I am here to honor the memory of my sister, Eleanor, and she taught me that the best way to honor someone who has died is not to wallow in sorrow. It is to live a full life, a life filled with joy, beauty, and growth." She paused, her blue eyes fixed on Julian, without fear. "In other words, it's about building, not tearing down. It's about creating legacies, not destroying them. But I suppose someone who makes a living stalking, attacking, and sabotaging other people's companies would never understand such a simple concept." The blow came like a hammer blow, smart, steely, and completely unexpected. Not only did it protect Caleb, it also honored his dignity and Eleanor's memory and exposed Julian's ugly, cruel face to those who mattered most. Julian Croft stood there, his face pale. The journalist with him lowered his camera, unsure how to react. The investors at the table looked at Julian with a mixture of contempt and disappointment. His dirty trick had failed completely. Victoria turned away, as if Julian no longer existed, and continued her unfinished conversation with an investor, as if nothing had happened. In that moment, as Caleb looked at her, the woman who had quelled a crisis with her intelligence and courage, he realized an undeniable truth. He didn't just admire her. He wasn't just attracted to her. I fell in love with her. After the gala night, Caleb's penthouse overlooked a glittering Central Park. Soft jazz played from an invisible speaker, but the silence between them was louder than any music. It was no longer the awkward silence of the past weeks, but a silence filled with unspoken emotions, with things that needed to be said. Victoria had changed out of her gorgeous dress into a soft silk hotel bathrobe. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city that never sleeps. Caleb stepped up to stand beside her. "Victoria," he began, his voice low and sincere. "I'm sorry." She turned back, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," he said, looking her straight in the eye. "For not seeing you all these years, for being blinded by my own pain and not realizing you were suffering too, for turning our tragedy into a transaction. Tonight you are not my girlfriend. You are my partner. You are the companion I didn't know I desperately needed." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Our deal. It's over. I will save Vance Manor. No conditions. I will do it because it's your legacy, a part of Eleanor. And I want to do it. But I hope our story isn't over." He stepped closer, the longing in his eyes unmistakable. "I fell in love with you, Victoria. Not with you in a gorgeous dress under the flashbulbs. With you, Victoria, in the library with your glasses and a book. I fell in love with your strength, your mind, your soul. I fell in love with you before I knew it." Tears began to roll down Victoria's cheeks, but they were tears of relief, of understanding. She smiled through them, a real smile, radiant and unguarded. "I saw the real you, Caleb," she whispered. "Not the cold CEO of the Sutton Group, but the man who built an empire out of love and then lost himself in that empire out of pain. And maybe I fell in love with him too." He gently wiped away the tears from her cheeks. And then he leaned down and placed a kiss on her lips. The kiss was not rushed, not demanding. It was gentle, tentative, and filled with regret for lost time and the promise of a future that awaited. It was their true beginning. 6 months later, Bloomberg TV News on the airport lounge screens was reporting on the spectacular recovery of Sutton Luxury Group. After successfully fending off a hostile takeover attempt by Croft Holdings, the anchor said, Sutton Group's stock has soared to an all-time high, cementing Caleb Sutton's status as one of the most accomplished leaders of his generation. But Caleb Sutton wasn't there to hear it. The story ends not in a fancy boardroom or a lavish gala, It ends on a crisp autumn morning at Vance Manor. The manor has been restored, its fresh coat of white paint gleaming in the sunlight, and the gardens have been revived with roses and lavender. Caleb and Victoria were walking in the garden, hand in hand. He was wearing a simple cashmere sweater and khakis. She was wearing a light floral dress, her hair loose. There were no cameras, no red carpet, no judging eyes. He paused, bent down, and cut a pale pink David Austin rose still wet with dew. He handed it to her, their fingers brushing. "Is it beautiful?" he asked, smiling. "It's so real," she replied, inhaling the sweet scent of the flower. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "That's all I want from now on. The truth." They shared a kiss, a gentle, peaceful, loving kiss. They found beauty not in the bright spotlight, but in the quiet of true love. A love built not on a show, but on forgiveness, understanding, and a new beginning, right where it all seemed to have ended. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel. Share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.